Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is the first of our monthly Talk to Our Expert meetings, and your hosts today are myself. I'm David Breslauer, and I'm sure I know most of you, and my colleague, Randy Simpson, and I'm sure many of you know her as well. So it's still not quite noon, but I guess we're getting close enough. So today's session is going to be about controlled vocabularies and Merlin X, and then we'll also leave some time for your questions, and your questions can be about what we've talked about today, or they can be about anything. We'd like to keep this meeting to about 30 minutes because we know everybody's busy, so we're really hoping that this will be hey, we're going to show you something really, really cool and useful, and also give you a chance to share with your colleagues at MerlinOne and also other folks that are Merlin users. And we plan on doing this once every month on the third Wednesday of the month at this exact same time, and you'll get an invitation for the next one as well. So let me go to the next screen. We have just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. This is a little bit different than our normal screen share sessions because this can have a lot more people in it than we normally do. And so we know there's sometimes an issue with audio. The session will be recorded, and we will send the link out to everybody that both joined the session and those that were not able to join the session. We'll also likely put them up on our YouTube page. I'm going to do my short presentation. If you have questions, please go ahead and ask them in the webinar chat window. Randy is monitoring that, and hopefully she will keep me honest and stop me whenever people have questions that we need to talk about. And as I said before, the questions don't have to be related to today's topic, and as I said before, we want to keep this to about 30 minutes. So,
and David, before you get started,
yep.
I want to point out to our newspaper customers that are on the call that the Merlin X rollout will happen this year for the newspaper customers. Our non-newspaper customers are all on the Merlin X, and all our new newspaper customers are on Merlin X. This is the UI that you're going to see in the chat today. But and you can get in touch with us about how high a priority you would like your publication to be on the rollout plan. So,
yeah, thanks for that, Randy. Yep, I had meant to mention that, and obviously was going to run right over it. So let's go keep on going. So what is a controlled vocabulary? And so this is kind of in a semi-official definition of what a controlled vocabulary is. Some of you may have no idea what it is, and so we're going to talk about it. And some of you probably already know what it is, and that's great. So we're going to provide a working knowledge of that, and this is a good definition of what a controlled vocabulary is. And it's a defined list of terms that are used to enhance the I can't make my mouse show up again. The searchability of content, and it's a way to organize knowledge for subsequent retrieval of content. So a controlled vocabulary scheme does require the use of predefined terms that have been created by the designers of the collection. So everybody's digital asset management system, everybody's Merlin system might have a different set of controlled vocabulary that might be peculiar and unique to what it is that you do, okay? And so controlled vocabularies are totally different than natural language types of vocabularies, okay? And so the simple search tool in Merlin, it provides a place to do natural language type interfaces, and the controlled vocabularies are created in the field level searching in Merlin. And we're going to actually show you that live, but just in order to prep for that a little bit. What's good about a controlled vocabulary? Well, here's what I think is good. It makes your database a lot easier to search because you're using the same language as everyone else in the organization. So it does provide a common language. And because it's a common language, it eliminates guesswork. And because it's tailored to your particular industry, the concepts become familiar. It's kind of like going to the Yellow Pages. Now, I don't know if anyone still uses the Yellow Pages very much, but everybody kind of knows what a Yellow Pages is, where you could go in, and if you were looking for car dealers, you would go to the Yellow Pages and flip to the car dealer page. And if you were looking for plumbers, you would go to the plumber page. And so a controlled vocabulary allows you to kind of define these categories that you use. This is more than just keywords, because a controlled vocabulary can be topical, and that is related to a specific field. So for an example, a field with cities or a field with countries. And so if you go to the country field, it will only have values for different countries in it, whereas the keywords could be associated with almost anything and may not be specifically related to a terminology like a city or a state or a country or a color or something like that. So what's not good about a controlled vocabulary? Well, it requires consistency, which was also one of the good things about a controlled vocabulary. So it does mean that you have to pay attention to what you're doing and think about what you're doing. And it does require some maintenance in order for it to be topical and relevant to your users. And so these are the things that I think are not so good about a controlled vocabulary. So in Merlin, we have three types of controlled vocabulary lists. We have keywords, we have pick lists, and we have taxonomy fields. And so everyone is probably familiar with the way keywords works in Merlin, and that is unchanged. And we'll talk about that, and we'll show you that as just as a review. And we have pick lists, and we have taxonomy fields in Merlin. So in a case of keywords, keyword lists are built automatically whenever new content comes in with keywords associated with them. And so those get automatically added to the keyword list so that the administrator of the system can go in and update the keywords or change them or remove keywords that don't make any sense for your users. And so that's how keywords work. The other nice thing about keywords in Merlin is that when you do delete them from the list, the keyword is also removed from the objects they're associated with. Or if you edit a keyword, perhaps you've got a keyword that's been misspelled or is too much related to another keyword, and so you want to combine them. When you edit the keyword, it will go in and edit, when you edit the list, it will go in, Merlin will edit all of the items where that keyword exists, okay? In order to do this, it does require the keyword privilege as part of your user group in order to edit keywords. So that's just a little bit of reminder about keywords. The taxonomy fields, we have 2 of them, and they're not installed by default because not everybody needs them or wants them, but we can install taxonomy fields, and these are ordered categories. So think about high school biology when you learned about kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, and that's one type of taxonomy list, okay? Another taxonomy list might be related to geography, so you could have continent, country, county, state, and city, and so on and so forth. So that's another way to think about taxonomy. In Merlin, there are 2 taxonomy fields. One is 9 levels deep, and the other one is 2 levels deep and is suitable for things like names and titles and things like that. So that's how you would use the taxonomy lists in Merlin, and I'm going to show you that as well. And the third type of controlled vocabulary that we have in Merlin, and this is what I'm really most excited about, are our pick lists. And so these pick lists can be assigned or applied to any other type of text field in Merlin other than keywords and taxonomy. And so you can create lists that are used for all users or for a specific group of users. So if you've got users in different countries, you might create different pick lists for the users in different countries. Or if you have users in different offices or different divisions, you might set up pick lists that are relevant to that group, and it's real easy to do. Pick lists may be static, which means you build them, or they may be dynamic, which means they're automatically built from the data in the database, and I'm going to show you that, and it's really cool. You can also set the pick list to be enforced. So if someone is editing metadata in Merlin and they want to add a value to a field, they have to pick from the pick list. Okay. It also can be associated with the upload form, with searching, or with editing. So it's really great how powerful the pick lists are, and it's very, very granular. You could have a different pick list for uploading from searching and from editing. So again, you can manage those pick lists. And you can also have pick lists that allow for both single entries and multiple entries. Some pick lists make sense for single entries. For example, pictures would only be from one country. They would never be from multiple countries, okay? But you might have another pick list that does allow you to add multiple values. And so I'm going to show you that as well. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. So I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to open my browser, and we're already logged into Merlin. And for those of you that are not familiar with MerlinX, that haven't seen it before, this is our new web browser interface called MerlinX, and it has a lot more functionality than you have previously experienced in the web browser. It's quite powerful, and I don't want to go into all of the cool things you could do here because I could spend an hour doing that, and I really, really, really want to focus on controlled vocabularies. And so the first thing I want you to notice is I've got this picture of this snowflake that I made last week in my backyard. And I'm going to open up my searching area, and so I want to show you how I can add search a field, specifically byline, for example. And byline is working from a controlled vocabulary. So if I type in my name or start to type in my name, actually I turned that one off, I'm sorry. Let's go down here and search country. I'd forgotten I had disabled that one. And notice it's auto-completing. I typed in UNI, and it's finding all of the values where UNI starts in the country field. Okay, so I just wanted to show you what that looks like. And before I dig too deeply into it, let's talk about keywords first. So for example, in my metadata area, because editing has been enabled for me, I've turned it on, I can go into keywords, and if I start to type SNO, it's auto-completing. And so I can type in SNOW, and if I want to keep going and type in FLAKE for snowflake and make that my keyword, I'm going to go ahead and tab. Notice it's saying, hey, snowflake is not on my official list of keywords. Would I like to add it? Now it's letting me do this because I have permission to do this. If I don't have permission to do this, I would get a message that says, hey, you're not allowed to do that. But now I've added snowflake to my keyword, and I'm going to also add another keyword here, and I'm going to type in winter. And it's notice again, it's auto-completing, so I'm going to type in winter, and that's a searchable keyword as well. So that's how keywords work. And to manage keywords, there's a place to do that, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But before I go in there, I wanted to show you this other pick list, this other type of controlled vocabulary we've got, and it's taxonomy. And so if taxonomy is available to you, you'll have a taxonomy palette. And here are my two taxonomy fields here. One is labeled taxonomy and one is called person. These, of course, can be relabeled. So if you have a terminology that makes more sense for your environment, you can relabel these fields. And if you wanted to add a taxonomy to this value, to this particular picture, you could click the plus button, and you'd get the list of all of that taxonomies that you've created. And so I've got a very limited taxonomic set in here right now. And this was actually a taxonomic set from one of our customers. But if I wanted to, I could go in and add, for example, health, and add in health, public health, threats, and pandemics, or whatever taxonomy value I wanted. And I'm going to add this, and so I've now added this to my picture as well. So this also becomes searchable. If you don't want it in here, you can get rid of it. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of weather, winter, and add that back in. So I've got weather here, and I'm going to scroll down and open up weather, and you can see I've got all of these options under weather, and I can add this in. So this is my category, my animal kingdom type of category that I've added to this particular picture. So that's taxonomy. So we've talked about keywords, we've talked about taxonomy. Let's talk about normal pick lists, and they can behave lots of different ways. So here's one example of a pick list. So if I type in, and notice it's auto-completing, and so I'm going to say, yes, I want this to be United States of America, and so that's been added to my pick list. But I have another type of pick list as well, and it's a pull-down pick list. So notice how this one is behaving. So I can actually choose a value from this particular pick list, and I'm going to just leave it at other. Okay, so I've got 4 different types of things I've shown you. 2 different types of pick lists, a true pick list that's a drop down, a type ahead pick list that allowed me to start to type and it auto-completed keywords, and also taxonomy. And I'm going to show you quickly how you can configure that and how cool this is. So I'm going to go into the administration area. And notice here, these are the pick lists that are currently configured on my server. So I've got one here for country, and notice it's a dynamic list. Okay? And so if I want to see, or if I want to edit that list, I can actually go look at it, and it's going to show me all of the values that are in this particular list. Now this is a dynamic list, so that means it was actually built from data that exists in Merlin. So if I wanted to create a new pick list that belonged to all of my user groups, so I would create it as a default pick list so that everybody would have access to it, and I'm going to choose the byline field, which is my creator. And I'm going to set the usage to be any, but it could be for edit, search, upload, or whatever I want it to be. And I can make the pick list a static list or a dynamic list. And notice it's actually remembered my previous list, and this can be really useful if you want to start out one list as the basis for another. Okay, so actually what I really want to do is clear that. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to clear the form, and we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to do it back down to creator, and we're going to say we want this to be for any usage, and I'm going to make a static list. And so I could type in my name, and if I wanted to add someone, I could add Randy's name. And so this becomes our pick list. And so if I add and say create new list, I now have this list that has 2 values in it. I can edit it anytime I want to correct a misspelling or to add additional values or remove additional values whenever I want. Or I could have built a dynamic list, and by clicking this, it would actually go through the entire database. And this is something that would take quite some time for this particular type of list. Look, because there are 25,000 different unique bylines in my Merlin system, but I did just build this pick list based upon all of the existing byline or creator value fields in this Merlin. So that's how easy it is to create a pick list. And if I wanted to, I could actually go in and edit this list by clicking on edit and setting it back to a static list, and then I would be able to change it. So notice I've got some really ugly bylines in here, and so by changing it to a static list, I would have the ability to go in and start deleting some of these if I wanted to, because they don't make sense. Okay, so I've got lots of interesting data in here. So now that it's a static list, I can actually go in and change the values, and I could delete some of these values or add additional values if I wanted to from this list. So that's kind of a nice thing to be able to do. Here's an example of a simple pick list based on language, okay? And if I click on this pick list, I'm able to go in and see how that is done. Now, creating pick lists is a 2-step process in Merlin, because you have to create the pick lists first, like I've done here. Okay, so here's my pick list for language. Okay, so these are all of the languages in my language pick list. Okay, and so that's the first step, is you have to build the pick list. And then the second step is in the fields area of Merlin. You have to choose, and so this is a list of all of the fields in your Merlin system, and I like to describe this as this is the thing that explodes your head, and I don't want to explode your head. but it's got the list of all of the fields in Merlin and the labels that you've applied to the field. So notice there's a field that we internally refer to as C byline 280, but it's been labeled creator or byline, and you could make it be author, or you could name it who took the picture. You know, this can be named or who wrote the story, so this can be named whatever you want it to be named. It's just a label. And then you choose the behavior of the pick list. Is it always available to you? And what is the behavior? Is it a text field? Is it an enforced list? Is it an enforced list that allows multiple values? Or is it an unenforced list or an unenforced list that allows multiple values? So you can set up the pick list to how they behave, okay? So you can choose how when you type in the data, is it going to force you to pick from the list, or is it going to let you type something else in, okay? And with a really, really good controlled vocabulary, an enforced list can work really, really well, because it means that the values in the database will only match the values in your pick list. In terms of byline, that gets to be a little bit unwieldy, because that list is so very, very long. It's not particularly useful, so you might want to just type in the name of the person you're looking for. But you can change it for the searching, and you can also change it for editing on how it behaves. Again, is it an enforced list or an unenforced list? So that's what I wanted to show you. We've talked about the 3 different types of controlled vocabularies in Merlin: the keywords, the taxonomy, and building pick lists. And we're really excited about being able to do that. So what I want to do now is I want to kind of wrap up and let us have some time for questions. So a couple of things to remember. You have to create the pick lists and then determine their use in the pick list area. And then you have to invoke the use of pick lists and their behavior in the fields area. And if you want to learn more about controlled vocabularies and how they might be used in the context of digital asset management systems, I have a couple of references for you: photometadata.org, controlledvocabulary.com, and ibiblio.org, and that's from the Special Librarians Association. They've got lots of other great information in there as well. So I think we've got about 10 minutes left, and if we need to run over, we don't mind. Let's open it up to your questions. So let's see. Yes, someone asked about, Deb asked about getting a copy of the presentation. Yes, we will do that and make it available along with the video that we're making. Jan is asking, can I change the labels in Dutch? Well, of course you can. That's not a problem at all. So you can change the labels to be anything you want. That's not a problem. Very much like the current webmaster, but even more powerful. John Hill is asking, you're more interested in learning about the new web interface. Is there going to be an overview for that? Yes. And when does that get rolled out? We hope to have the first ones deployed by the end of the first quarter. One of our big concerns for our newspaper customers is we know you don't want downtime, because we know your publishing cycle is 24/7. And so it's really painful if your Merlin is not available to you. And so what we're finishing up on is figuring out the best way to minimize downtime, because there will be some downtime for this update, because there are a number of new fields that get added to your system to make Merlin even more powerful and useful. And so that's being worked on, and we hope to start the rollouts before the end of this quarter. So those are all of the questions that I see. If anybody has other questions, you could hit the raise your hand button, and hopefully Randy and I will see those. Or if you've asked questions, let's see, Catherine's asking questions.
Catherine.
Well. There you go, Catherine. Would you mind giving an example of why you would want users to have different search versus edit abilities for pick lists? Sure. So, for example, you've got a whole bunch of data in your system, and you want people to be able to search on all of the values that might have come in with the legacy data. But going forward, you want them to start using a controlled vocabulary. So you might set it up so that when you're editing, it restricts you to only the terminology that you want to use going forward, but you don't want to totally deprecate the terminology that might have been used previously. So that's a good reason for being able to separate them. Now, if you don't care about that, you know, it's not that big of a deal. But that's kind of why we set it up, so that you can have a different list for searching or for editing or for uploading. So when you upload, you may even want to have people to an even more restricted list when they upload, because you don't want them going too wild when they add those add that information. So I hope that makes that clear. So Michelle, what are the system requirements for Merlin X? Well, Michelle, since it's hosted, basically you don't care about it's running on the back end because it's on our servers. In terms of the end user requirements, as long as you can launch a modern web browser on Macintosh or Windows, you're fine. It doesn't require any special software, and there are no minimum requirements. As long as you can, if you can browse the internet, you can browse Merlin. Melissa is asking, as an admin, are we able to reorder how the usage history data is displayed? Okay. So in the pub history, right now you cannot reorder the usage history, and there are two ways to get usage history. So this is a non-controlled vocabulary question. So in the usage history, you can get that information out in a report. So this version of Merlin X has 20 reports included in it, and those reports have usage history as well. So in addition to going in and looking at the usage history of an item, which currently you cannot rearrange, but we'll put it down that was a request, but you can get that information out in a CSV file as a report, and you can do that on demand. And of course, because it's a CSV file, once you open it up in Excel, you can rearrange the columns. Is drag and drop possible to CCI Newsgate for Merlin X? Well, of course, Jan. That's a great question, but yes, you will be able to drag and drop out of Merlin X into CCI and into other systems that will allow you to receive that type of file. And Catherine said, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad I explained that well enough for you. Okay. So I hope I didn't speak too quickly. I know sometimes I tend to speak faster than I should on these things, but I did want to answer all of your questions. Let's see. Oh.